Okay, so welcome everyone. This is POP's legal team fourth workshop that we've done in the past year. We've been doing these workshops throughout the pandemic to update not only our client community, but the community in general, whoever wants to join us, to update them on any kind of housing court updates and make them aware of tenant protections and things that have passed this past year. There's been a lot of changes. So I wanna introduce our legal team, and I'll just ask them to either raise their hand or you can do the symbol on Zoom. Well, my name is Carissa. I'm a legal advocate with the POPs team. I've been here for about a year. I'm glad to be with you all. And we also have Elizabeth Maris, who is our staff attorney. We have Arturo Arena, who's our legal clinic coordinator. We have Maeve Callaghy, who is our other staff attorney. Jesse Moriarty, sorry if I said your name wrong, Jesse, who's one of our legal advocates. Lucia Alanis, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, Lucy. But she is working with us over the summer. Jocelyn Fakan, who is one of our interns, and Lily Frederick, who is another one of our interns. So I'm gonna share my screen to start the presentation. Okay, can I get a thumbs up if people can see my screen? Great. All right, this is Beth.
Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you, Carissa, for starting us off. So a lot of changes on housing court over the past 15 months that we've all been surviving this pandemic. Whenever anyone asks me what's happening with housing court, I say it's complicated. There's a lot that's been happening. What's happening currently is that there was so let me back up actually. Over 2020, a lot of different things happened. There was an initial 3-month eviction moratorium, meaning no evictions in New York City after March 13th, 2020. And then the governor extended that from March 20th through June 20th, 2020. So no evictions for a 3-month period when the pandemic began. And then for the second half of the year, housing court was taking what I kind of call baby steps towards returning to other operations. However, the pandemic was still continuing, job insecurity and job loss and and obviously the health impacts and all the loss coming from the pandemic was still continuing. And so for the second half of the year, there were virtually no evictions, but court was open. Court has been open this entire time. At the beginning, it was open only for emergencies. And then that expanded after June to a greater degree of cases. And there were 7 residential evictions in November and December of 2020. And then the legislature passed a law that provided for a 2-month moratorium for most people, meaning no evictions again for January and February, and also provided for the possibility of a hardship declaration form. And what the hardship declaration form is that it had to be provided to every tenant for whom there was a rent demand or a court case being filed, and those tenants would have an opportunity to say that they had suffered a financial hardship during the pandemic and that they were claiming the right to extend the moratorium. And those could be submitted to the court and to the landlord or to either. And if that was done, there would be an additional extension through May 1st. Then that time period was extended. So that has now been extended to August 31st, 2021 for most tenants. And the reason there's it's not for all tenants is because there is some category of cases that can move forward, which for the most part are holdover cases in which a tenant is accused of nuisance conduct and that nuisance conduct is alleged to be continuing. But for most people not subject to that category, if they submit a hardship declaration, their case should be paused for the extent of the moratorium. There was another law that was passed before the law in December called the Tenant Safe Harbor Act. And what the Tenant Safe Harbor Act provides is that if a tenant is sued for non-payment of rent and they experienced a financial hardship during the pandemic, which is defined as having started on March 7th, 2020, they can claim the defense that they suffered a financial hardship during the pandemic. And if they can prevail on that defense, they can then be protected from eviction, but not protected from owing the money to the landlord for the rent arrears that they owe. So it's a technical defense. Definitely recommend people get connected to legal counsel if they're trying to assert it. And the Tenant Safe Harbor Act has no end date other than when there's no longer restrictions on public gatherings. And so it has continued since it's been passed, and it's still in place today. So that's the general overview of what's happened. And the reason that's important and relevant is that, a lot of tenants and organizations really fought hard to get protections for tenants from eviction, and also fought hard to get rent assistance. And that's what we're going to talk about today primarily, is the rent assistance that's potentially available to tenants in New York State. And the time is now for everyone who's potentially eligible to apply for and hopefully get approved for that assistance, so that they can use this time to resolve the eviction risk that they're under and hopefully bring some stability to themselves and their families. Okay. Sorry, so I think I'm turning it over to Carissa for the next slide.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't figure out how to share my screen at the same time that I unmuted myself. So let me restart. But we do have a packed agenda for today. We're going to cover everything about ERAP as much as we can. We'll talk about what is ERAP, how to apply for ERAP, and then we'll go over some common questions that we've gotten, and we'll have some places where we'll stop and let the audience ask questions. So ERAP is an statewide emergency rent assistance program that was recently passed with the new state budget. It was allocated $2.7 billion, which is kind of hard to make sense of, but it's a lot more than what was allocated for the program last year, the rent relief program, and we'll talk about the differences shortly. But this program has the potential to cover arrears for tenants starting March 13th, 2020 to the present. That means that tenants could get rent relief payments for up to 12 months, and they could also potentially qualify for 3 months of future rent to be paid if the program finds them eligible under the rent burden guidelines, which means that they pay more than 30% of their income towards their rent. They can also possibly cover utility arrears if tenants owe for utilities. So we understand that many people had applied to the rent relief program and were denied, and they might have some skepticism about this new state program and whether they'll get be approved for that. But we wanted to point out that there's some significant differences here. For one, the state is aware of the challenges that arose during the program for the rent relief, and a lot of housing justice people had fought for changes, which are now being implemented with, or we hope that they're being implemented with this new program. One significant change is that this program is being administered by the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, whereas the old rent relief program was administered through DHCR, a completely different city agency. There's also a lot more funds being allocated to this program. the requirements to be eligible are less stringent, and we anticipate that that will mean that more people could potentially qualify and actually be approved for funding. And this program also has a longer time period that they are considering to provide rent relief for. So the rent relief program that was passed last summer was only for the months of, I think it was March through June of 2020, whereas this program will be from March 2020 to the present, whether that's June 2021 or July 2021, whenever it is that you apply.
I'm sorry, Carissa, let me just Carissa, I'm sorry, let me just correct you. The rent relief program was for April through July 2020 rents only. Thank you, sorry.
Okay. No problem. So we wanted to note here that if you did apply for the rent relief program, and whether you were approved or denied for that program, you can still request or apply for this new program, ERAP. You just cannot request relief for the months that you received funding from the rent relief, the old program, if you were approved at all. So we'll say more about that later. All right, so for those who are, or the eligibility requirements are that you have to be a household with an income either at or less than 80% of the area median income. You also have to have someone in your household who's experienced financial impact due to the pandemic and owe rent where you currently live. So regarding the income qualifications, the area median income is actually by county, but this is a chart based on New York City area median income. So they will consider income based on household size. So according to this chart, if you are a household size of 1 and you make an annual income of less than $66,850 a year, then you could qualify for this program. If you're a household size of 4 and make less than around $95,000, then you can also qualify for this program. And one important thing to note here is that when you apply for the program and you submit your income documents, you can submit documents for either your current income or your 2020 income in order to meet this qualification. So to prove that someone in your house, excuse me, met the financial hardship qualification, there's a couple of things. They can meet it either by showing that they received unemployment benefits at any point during the pandemic. So even if that was for a period of 3 months in the summer of 2020, then that qualifies. And they're let's say they're currently employed, then that qualifies. If you experienced, as a household, if you experienced a reduction in income, if there was any significant costs incurred because of the pandemic, and then there's a general category of if you experienced financial hardship either directly or indirectly due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you have questions about whether something you experience might make you eligible, then you can ask that question when we get to that point later. And then we just want to make it clear that you have to have an obligation to pay rent in order to qualify for the program, and be behind in rent for the months after March 13th, 2020. So if you owe rent for months before March 13th, 2020, and those are the only months that you owe, then you can't apply to this program. However, if you owe for months before March 13th, 2020, plus months after that, then you can apply to the program for the months after March 13th, 2020, and you would just seek assistance, a different assistance for the months prior to that. And again, it has to be rent that's owed at your current residence. So if you've moved and you have a new place, but you owe rent for your old residence, you cannot apply to receive rent assistance for the old residents. Okay, and a couple of important things to note here is that this program is not going to be considering immigration status. So if you are undocumented or you're a resident or whatever the case is, that's not going to be something that the program evaluates. So you can still apply. They're also not going to look at your
sorry to
features.
interrupt you. We're going to stop in about 5 minutes to hear questions from our audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. So this program also is not going to look at your future ability to pay rent, which is really big because many of the other rent assistance programs you would apply for will require that you have enough income to pay your ongoing rent, but this doesn't. So it's a huge help for a lot of people who are still in a situation where they cannot pay their ongoing rent. I want to reiterate that if you received assistance either through public or private funds at any point in the last, for the months that the program is considering, so from March 13th, 2020 to the present, then you cannot request assistance for the months that you received other assistance. So let's say you owe rent for the full 12 months. So from March 13th, March 13th, 2020 to March 2021, and you received assistance, let's say from us at POTS for 2 months, then you can't request assistance for the 2 months that you got help from POTS. So just be aware of that because it could be an issue in your application. Other things are that if someone in your household does have a social security number, you do have to provide that. If they don't have one, you don't have to provide it. It's only if they do that you must. And same thing with tax documentation. So if someone in the household filed taxes for 2020, then you have to provide the information from that tax return. But if you did not, then you don't need to provide that. Okay, so there is a priority in which they will process the applications. And it's not only in order for how they're going to process the applications, but also how they're going to allocate the funds. So the first priority households will be households who earn 50% area median income or less, and who also experienced one of these categories. So if they have someone in their household who are currently unemployed for at least 90 days, if they're a veteran, if they experience domestic violence, or they're a survivor of human trafficking, or if you have an eviction case that's related to your current residence that's pending in housing court, you would qualify as priority. If you live in a mobile home, if you live in a community that was disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, which we've actually checked most of the zip codes, and at least for those, for clients of POTS, many of our clients will meet that requirement because Bronx was a hard hit community. And then if you live in a apartment building that has 20 or fewer units, you would also meet the priority number one. Priority two would be households that have that income of 50% or less of the area median income, but they don't meet any of these other categories. All right, and then for priority three, it will be households that have meet the area median income 80%, plus they experience one of these different categories. And priority four is 80% AMI or area median income. All right, so do we have any questions in the chat or from the audience? If you want to speak your question out loud, you can either raise your hand or indicate to one of us that you have a question you want to ask at this point. And we'll have more time later to ask questions about other things, but right now we want to limit it to questions just regarding eligibility.
Okay, Carissa, so we do have two questions. The first one is from Miss Jenny Karshi. So she, it's a little bit more detailed, but basically she owes maintenance and not rent. She lives in a co-op and she's been injured and unable to work consistently. So is there some sort of advice that we can give?
Good question. Yeah, I'll let Beth take that question.
Okay, thank you for your question. So this is a program for tenants, and I saw your question and I was looking because I think this might be a frequently asked question on the OTDA website, but I didn't find it just these past few minutes. I don't think that co-ops are covered by this program. If you want to send us a private contact in the chat, you can send it to Lucia Alanis and we can follow up with you about that. But my understanding, my memory of this is that it doesn't cover, unfortunately, people who owe maintenance as opposed to rent. This is a program for rent, and just like homeowners have impacted, many of them by the pandemic, they're not eligible for assistance, unfortunately, under this program. So I believe that's the correct answer.
Great, thank you, Beth. And also we have a question from our colleague, Stephanie. So she says, hi, Carissa. You said that if we received assistance from another organization, such as POTS, for 2 months, as an example, can we not ask for assistance through ERAP for those 2 months specifically? She also says that however, if POTS didn't cover all of the rent for those 2 months, can they still receive assistance through ERAP?
That is a great question, Stephanie. Thank you for asking it to clarify. The basic answer is yes, you can still request assistance for the remaining balance for rent in the month that you received assistance, but it didn't cover full rent. We'll go over in more detail how to fill out the portion where you have to enter in your rent history, because it can be a little complicated. So I'll hold the rest of the explanation until then, but I don't know if Beth wants to add anything more to that.
Nope, you covered it. Thank you.
So any additional questions? Either people who want to ask it verbally, who maybe tuned in by phone and are unable to write it in the chat, please indicate to us.
I just want to highlight something. It's not a question, but I just want to highlight what Carissa shared in terms of the priorities. So I know we have a lot to cover, but what I want everyone to understand is those priorities, of those 4 priorities that we just covered, it's really important if you're in that first group to get your application in the first 30 days. So we're going to move now to some of the details about how you do an application. However you do it, make sure you do it in the first 30 days and as early as possible, because tenants that meet that first priority of under 50% of the area median income and some of those other qualifying factors, including living in an area disproportionately impacted by COVID, should receive the priority consideration, not just in how the order their applications are processed, but in the award of funds. The funds that Carissa mentioned is an overall number posted by the governor. We unfortunately anticipate that there is much less available funds for everyone who's going to need it. And so it's really important that people that are in need apply for this program if they think they might have a chance of becoming eligible. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that. Okay. If there are no other questions, we can go ahead and move on to the next section. So I'll turn it over to my colleague Arturo, who's going to talk about the application itself and highlight some of the application parts.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Arturo. In this section, we're just going to go over some of the things that you're going to see when you are at the website for OTDA, and some of our recommendations when at the time of completing an application. On the next slide, On the top left side of the website, we can see the languages option. And this is important to know that the languages option is provided by Google Translate. It's not that the OTDA took the time to translate it itself or has their own team to translate it. Some of the advocates and people that have tried to complete an application in a different language have noticed that some of the translation is not as, I'm gonna put it, as good as we would like to, or as accurate as we would like to. So it is important to keep that in mind. On the next slide, I highlighted register now, which is there are two options in how to start an application. And again, advocates have been changing, we have been changing our mind in terms of what to recommend the applicant that want to do it by itself. In the past, we would complete an application just by clicking on apply here now, but then we moved to recommending applicants to register. And the main difference is that when you register, one, you're gonna have to use your email address and your phone number to do what is called a two-step authentication, so that only you can log in. But you can also have record when you submit documents, and you will have the confirmation number you could see, and you will also have the date when you submit any document at the end of the application. Versus when you only do apply here and now, in the past you have to complete the application at once. You can now go back to it, and by registering you will be able to go back to it. Unfortunately, the platform has some glitches, and OTDA decided to take that option, the option of going back to the same application and continuing. So as for now, OTDA mentioned that if an applicant hasn't completed the application, they will have to start a new application. At least we are still recommending people to register, just because after you register, complete the application and submit documents, you're gonna be able to log in into your profile and see the documents you provided and the date when you did it. If you do not register, you wouldn't be able to at least check that. The next slide, it's really important. So again, we are going to share some of this information as well, but at least we want you to know that there is a system from two sides. We have the OTDA helpline, in which people can contact them 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. They also have the TTY number, and they also have the option to chat with a representative. When you get the presentation, you're gonna be able to click, and there is a direct link to it. And that is important because someone from OTDA would be able to chat with you. Then we also have some organizations that were able to secure some funding and assist the community. And those two organizations in the Bronx, the main organization that were actually hired by OTDA and got some funding to do these applications are Bronx Work. Phone number, just for those that are listening over the phone. The phone number from Bronx Works is 718-508-3107. And the other organization is NICA, and the phone number is 718-866-0038. Then we also have some organization from our community that live in Manhattan, and we have Catholic Charities at 888-744-7900. And we also have University Settlement at 212-453-4500. Again, one of the things about these fundings and this application is that OTDA mentioned it, that an applicant can get assistance from any organization that they funded, regardless of the borough they live in. So let's say a resident from the Bronx can still get assistance from Catholic Charities in Manhattan or University Settlement. That's what we were told. On the next slide, we're gonna share some of the tips for before you apply. And again, it's really important because two things. One, as I mentioned it before, we are not able to go back and forth to the same application. So it is better to have all the documents and all the information we need right in front of us before we start the application. Again, have everything prepared before you apply. Gather all the documents, either your document or the household document, information about income. It is important to request the rent history from the landlord. That is the document that we had some. It will take longer for our client and for us to get from the landlord. So that is important. It should be easy to access. The landlord should be able to send you that information right away. And if you have an email, they should send it through you by email. The document required by this application is similar as the document that a food stamp application will request. So for the folks that have been able to apply for food stamp, it is a similar documentation that they may ask for. As I mentioned before, create an account, and I explained why it is important to have an account. But it is important to know that you need an email address for that. And if you create an account with your email address, you won't be able to create an account, another account with your email address. So I know that you may try to help some family members, some people in the community, but you can only use one email address for registration, to register an account. Connect with advocates and caseworker. If you are already working with an advocate or case manager, it is good to work with them if they have the time to assist you with those, because one, some of the information that the application may require will be information that they may have already, and also it's always good to have someone else to help out, especially someone that have training or someone that have done this application before. The last part, and I believe is the most important one, is to be able to save the information. Unfortunately, OTDA application doesn't allow us to download the application, and I know that a lot of organizations and advocates are trying to fix that, but unfortunately they don't. So one, we want you to save your email, password, application number that they will give you, and also if you can take a screenshot on each section of the application, just so that you can go back to it and see the application that you submitted and all the information that you have submitted to them. Next, please. Again, on the same token on information, all tenants will have to submit some documents, right? So they have to prove identity for the head of household of the main applicant, and also from every member of the household. We have to prove the place that we're living at, that we live at that place. We also need proof of income. We also need the amount of rent that we pay every month, and also the arrears. So we need the rent arrears, and for those applicants that are trying to get utilities arrears, we also need that information. And the only feedback on utilities arrears is that if you can go online, let's say Connecticut, and you have access to it, you can see the rent, the arrears from last year. So that's something important to have as well. And just to give an example, again, they do share more extended list of documents that they require and that they accept. But just to give you some, the list, the driver license, the rent receipt, school records, especially when you have minors, benefit award letters. We may have people receiving food stamp or people receiving SSI, if we want to share that. The utility bills, I mentioned it, you can go online if you have access to it and get the history. Another proof of residence would be a bank statement, insurance bill, or any piece of mail that would have your name and address on it. The last portion, again, if none of that can be provided, one of the good things about the program is that they do allow self-attestment, at least for income verification. Okay, some of the highlights, and we were able to get a copy of an application. Unfortunately, we cannot print it, fill it, and mail it. You have to be online. But for training purposes and just to inform you, this is a portion of the application that asks you about the rent arrears. And And as you can see, it's gonna ask you from March 2020 to the current month, now June. And what I want you to take out of this is one, how important is it for you to have the rent history? If you do have it, you can match it with your own records, and it will be easier for you to add this information. Again, you don't have to do it by yourself. There are some organizations that we mentioned it that can assist. So if you can and you do it by yourself and you're gonna do it, this is part of the application where you're gonna have to include the monthly rent, include the amount that hasn't been paid, and include any late fees. And I know that right now the regulation says that a landlord cannot charge you for late fee, but I'm assuming that they still want to know. On the bottom of that part, it asks you whether you want to be, I guess, whether you want the agency to assist you with up to 3 months in the future. If you say yes, they're gonna ask you which month, and again, this is just in case that they have fundings available. Right, the other part of the application, this is similar than the rent arrears, but this is for the utility arrears, Con Edison. They do want to ask you some question whether you pay heat, gas separate, and also they want to know the amount of the bill for those months and how much you pay. Again, I don't save all my bills with Con Edison. I'd rather go online and just print it or have it as a PDF if you have access to it. This is the last part of the application, and I know our attorney Elizabeth will take on it. I just want to share that they don't get applicants don't get a confirmation number, but this is the closest thing to a confirmation that you went through the entire application and you are completing the application. And with that, I'll just share the mic with Beth.
Thank you, Arturo.
Sure.
As Arturo said, this is the final step of doing the online application before you upload documents. And once you've completed this step and it's been signed, the application is considered complete. As we shared earlier, partial applications are not currently you can't go back to partially submitted applications to add on. That's a problem with the website, which OTDA is aware of, and they say they're working on. But we highly encourage you to have all your available documents to submit it completely and to complete the attestation. The attestation is again, like the application, you can't print it out and review it ahead of time. And if you're working with an advocate, you're going to want to make sure you fully understand. If you're signing it yourself, obviously to read it slowly, make sure everything applies, and that you can correctly confirm that the things that you're asking you to certify are true. If you're working with an advocate, the advocate will take the necessary steps to make sure you fully understand the attestation and that you can confirm it's true. Some of it is, there's a lot of warning language about tenants being aware, and the landlord's attestation is similar, that the information you're submitting on the application is accurate, and that you understand that it will be verified. And it talks a little bit about the steps that they will take to verify, and who the information that's submitted will potentially be shared with. And I think I'm going to leave it there, but obviously no one should sign something that they don't know, understand what it means, or if they have questions, or certainly if it's untrue. And what I personally worry about is people could make a mistake in understanding what the rent history is and the breakdown and payments that may have received. So let's say somebody got a one-shot deal from HRA, they may not know what months it was intended to cover. You're going to want to have all that information, do the best you can, obviously, and in submitting an application which is truthful. But if you need help, you should definitely reach out to an advocate or one of the CBOs. And you can also, we'll go through this at the end, but there is a helpline that OTDA has, which the wait lines are varying and the chat time is varying, but they are available to answer questions. So I'm going to leave it there and turn it over to
Jesse.
Jesse. Thank you, Jesse.
That's me. So we're taking questions right now first, or no?
Yes. So at this point, we can take questions about anything that we've covered so far. we'll let you know if a question that comes up, it will be covered in the next section, and we'll ask that you just hold off and for us to answer it in the presentation. And then if we don't, you'll have another chance to ask it. So are there any questions in the chat, or anyone who wants to unmute themselves to ask a question themselves?
There are no questions in the chat. So I'm not sure if someone wants to ask one verbally.
I would love, I don't want to keep you from asking questions, but I just want to share that I know this seems overwhelming, and what we don't want is for people to be afraid to apply. So even though we're sharing information and we're showing you screens that are very dense and it's hard to see them here, this is a program for everyone who's eligible, and we are all here to try to help as many people as we possibly can access this program. So don't be intimidated, don't be afraid. This is your right to apply for these funds. They are there because we have all collectively suffered enormous loss, and we are here to support you in seeking that assistance. So just a comment that I know it's scary to think about what happens when you apply for help. The good things about the program, it does not have to be repaid. It does not count as taxable income. It is the product of a lot of work and thought about how to best support people within the available funds that the government has. And so we really strongly encourage people to apply and to seek help if you need it.
Okay, we have one question in the chat. So are you able to edit the application if a mistake is made?
Yeah, unfortunately, no. The short question will be that at the moment, the OTDA platform doesn't allow us to do that. And what they were recommending people was like, hey, if you by something happened, you were not able to complete the application, you can go back and do a new application. Now, as for a mistake, I don't know if Beth have any additional assistance, but my understanding is that you could reach out to OTDA directly, and they will take it probably on one-on-one basis, but you can always submit a new application.
All I would add is, yes, you can call OTDA. If you know there's a mistake, my advice would be to call OTDA to bring it to their attention so that they can flag it and correct the error, assuming it's, it's truly an error that's significant enough. I'll give another example. I have a client who submitted the application completely on his own, and he does one of the priority factors is if you have a pending eviction proceeding, and that answer was yes for him, but he didn't have his index number handy. So he couldn't say that it was, I think that he wasn't able to provide that information. And so he was able to upload, we were able to help him upload documents showing the index number. So even though you can't edit an application that's already been submitted, you can call OTDA, you can send a chat to OTDA, and you can upload documents if that would help clarify the application.
Great, we have one additional question. So how does the landlord certify the application? And I believe this may be answered later. Just please confirm, colleague.
Yes, that's actually the next section.
Yeah. Great, so I think we will wait to answer that later in the presentation. Thank you.
All right, so the next section is about, I'm Jessie, by the way, expectations for the landlord. And so what documents specifically does the landlord need to submit for ERAP? So first, the completed W-9 tax form, banking information to receive a direct deposit, documentation of rent due from tenant, proof of last monthly rent, so lease, canceled check, etc., and agreement to ERAP terms. So we're anticipating that OTDA will be reaching out to the landlords to complete this information. So tenants don't need to have these documents in order to submit an application for themselves, and they don't need to collect them from the landlord. Okay, and what are the ERAP terms exactly the landlord must agree to? So like we talked about before, the last thing that they need to submit is an agreement to the terms. So they have to agree that ERAP satisfies the full rental obligation for the time period that's being requested for, that they will waive late fees for that period that ERAP is paid, that they'll have no rent increase for 1 year, and the landlord may not evict due to an expired lease, exception for small buildings, for a year after payment. And additionally, the landlord must notify the tenant of the protections under the law. Okay, next we have the next section kind of talks about frequently asked questions and like troubleshooting, common issues and applications, and just questions that have come up a lot. So first is, how long will the process take? So tenants should be notified within 4 to 6 weeks from the date of submission. The time frame will vary depending on the completeness of the application by the tenant and the landlord and the correct documentation being submitted. I think it will also vary depending on the choice of communication by the tenant. Like if you chose to get things by mail, it might be slower than if you chose by text or email. But that's just an assumption, I'm not sure. So how often will they notify me of the status of my application? So once an application is complete, applicants will receive instructions about how to track their application. They'll receive a status alerts through their preferred contact methods. So like I said before, text, email, or mail. And an award letter will be provided to the tenant and the landlord after approval, detailing the amount paid or the amount that they're going to receive. Next question, I owe more than 12 months of rent arrears. Can I still apply and receive help from ERAP? Yes, and after ERAP is decided, then you can seek other assistance for the rest of arrears owed. So if you owed 4 months before March 13th of 2020, then you could apply for those 4 months in a one-shot deal after you applied for the 12 months of help from ERAP, theoretically. Are tenants supposed to gather documents from the landlord? As we touched upon before, the landlord will receive an invitation by email or text to complete their portion of the application. Tenants are not responsible for collecting documents from the landlord, and they don't need to ask the landlord if they have these documents before they apply. The landlord is responsible for the documents that they need to submit. And last question, what if my landlord refuses to do his or her part of the application or refuses the payment? If the landlord refuses to complete their part of the app, then the tenant should contact the designated local organization, local organization for assistance, and they'll receive a provisional eligibility letter stating that if the landlord had cooperated, the back rent would have been paid, and they can then use that provisional letter. If they end up having a court date later, if their landlord tries to bring them to court, they can show the judge the provisional letter that they received saying that the landlord didn't cooperate and the back rent could have been paid. The next slide, this part's a bit confusing. Can I qualify for ERAP if I have roommates or if I sublet an apartment? It's a maybe, it depends. So the landlord and property owner's managing agent has to be a part of the application. So if money is owed between a primary tenant and a subleasee, the subleasee may not be eligible for ERAP. If a tenant owes rent to a landlord and the tenant has roommates, the roommates are not eligible for ERAP, but the tenant may be eligible. If the roommates pay together and the lease has one amount, then the entire group of roommates and the roommates need to apply together. Next slide, what happens if I have an existing housing court case? So you have to report your housing court index number within the application, but it shouldn't stop you from applying. And
can I add one thing, Jesse? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So there's one of the other great things about ERAP is that it provides protection against eviction. So the law ERAP provides that if someone has applied for ERAP who is sued for non-payment of rent, for example, the court case, let's say it's beyond August 31st, that time has run out and you did a hardship declaration and you're past August 31st and they're still considering the application, you are entitled to an additional stay or protection from eviction while your application is being considered. So there is a benefit to getting that extra consideration.
Okay, should we do the next one? Is what if I'm already receiving Section 8 or live in public housing? So this one's, so we've heard, I guess, that if you have to also record whether or not you live in Section 8 or public housing within the application, and like what portion of rent that they pay versus what you pay. I guess like we were told in a previous, or I was told in a previous presentation, that these tenants are going to be put on a different, like sort of like the end of the line for the applications. But legal aid was encouraging people to still apply, because I believe they're going to try to fight this like ranking per se, because they want to show NYC and OTDA that people need help who are living in Section 8 and public housing, as well as other apartments. So people should definitely still be encouraged to apply. And yeah, I guess we're not really sure.
I think
So
our
I guess,
hope
yeah.
is our position, I think, is if you're eligible, you should apply. We believe those folks are eligible. We don't know how funds are going to be allocated and how that status will be weighed, but we encourage you to apply, and we hope that you'll be found eligible.
Okay, and then the last section is just resources. So there's a lot of resources available for tenants to help you complete the application, and additionally after the application. So there's accommodations available for those with disabilities. For those with hearing issues, there's a TTY line. There's assistance with applying in different format as well, Braille and audio file. And those with sight difficulties, the application's available in large text. So for anyone dialed in to seek accommodations, you can reach out to 844-691-7368. And for the hearing impaired, the TTY phone number is 833-843-8829. And there's also translation for 8 languages available. And additionally, we just put the OTDA number here, 1-844-691-7368 for assistance. And then you could also reach out to community-based organization, Bronx Works or NICA, that we talked about before. They could assist you with your application. And yeah, if you're working with an advocate, you could designate him or her as a third party to receive notices and help track your application. You could put in an email, I believe a phone number as a third party, and you can help coordinate. They can help coordinate your application with him or her. And I believe that's all we have.
Great.
I don't know if there's any more questions.
Yeah, we do have one question, and I reached out to Miss Victoria White individually because I had a question. So it says that she applied for the program, and I'm assuming it's my landlord hasn't sent his information as of yet. Should she call and send them her application? Ms. White, also, if you want to tune in and clarify your question, that'd be great.
I think go ahead.
Yeah, I applied, but as of yet, he has not sent his information. So should I send him my ID number that they gave me when I applied?
You mean the application number? I think what you're asking is how much should you be advocating with your landlord to do their part of the application?
They haven't received nothing from him yet.
Pardon?
They have not received nothing from him yet.
Right. And so my advice would be to when any tenant is applying, I think it makes sense to alert your landlord's office that the application is being submitted. Hopefully you've already been in touch before the application is submitted, because we hope that they'll be cooperating and providing those rent histories just so you can do the breakdown of arrears accurately. I understand. I guess I'm struggling with the question a little bit, because you should not give your login information to anyone other than a trusted advocate or attorney who you're working with. That said, I believe it's fine to give your application number and to the landlord, but there should be outreach that's being done if the landlord is not cooperating. So my advice would be to give your name and your application number, and that you have that you have started the application and you want them to participate. We don't exactly know how long application processing is going to take, even though it does say in the frequently asked questions 4 to 6 weeks. That's what OTDA says. But if it is going to vary widely, and the first step of eligibility may or may not require the landlords to have done their part. So it is conceivable that OTDA can be working on your application even if the landlord hasn't yet participated. We don't know what it looks like behind the scenes. So my advice would be to reach out to the landlord to alert them to the application, to ask them to do it. There will be additional outreach made to them by the agency or by the designated CBOs if they don't respond. And landlords should be motivated to do this. And so if you're calling the landlord and you're speaking to someone who may not be that high up in the chain of the organization, it's fine to say, who is the person in your office who's coordinating ERAP? I need to speak to them to make sure that what's done is being done.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck.
Okay, any additional questions? I don't see any in the chat, but if someone wants to ask the questions verbally, please go ahead. Please go ahead and ask your question. Clover Stewart.
Okay, so I have a rocky relationship with my landlord. Even last week, she sent me a text letting me know that she's not my parents, so she's not supposed to be paying rent for me. So I don't know if he would be, she is willing to sign that paper, and I owe 3 months.
So we don't know how each individual landlord is going to respond. And just as tenants are under stress from the pandemic, landlords are under stress from the pandemic. And our hope is that landlords will act in a responsible way, do what the law contemplates that they need to do to assist tenants and to help themselves access the available funds that are going to help stabilize their buildings. We hear a lot about challenging interactions between tenants and landlords. And my advice would be, no matter how you feel about how things went in the past, even as recent as last week, try to set that aside. You have the right to apply for this program. They have an obligation to participate in the program. If they don't, there will be consequences that should protect you. And so I would say, do your part, let them know, see what they do. If you need legal support or any support, reach out to a trusted advocate or attorney.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck.
All right, are there any other questions? We'll give you another minute or so for people to give you a chance to ask questions if you still have any. But please use this time, because this is, it's a huge program, it's confusing. So it's totally understandable if we finish this presentation, you used to have questions, so please ask them.
Carissa, I'm going to ask a question to the team. So what should someone do if they are not the tenant of record? Are they eligible for the program?
That's a good question. Does anyone want to take it?
Well, it depends whether or not they have roommates, right? And who's paying whether or not the landlord is owed money in the first place. Like if you are subleasing from somebody and that person has been paying the landlord the whole time and you just owe the, so I guess like the tenant money, not the landlord, then you wouldn't be eligible. But it kind of, I guess it depends on the specifics, like whether or not your roommates are together on, well, I guess you're asking about somebody who's not on the lease. So it depends whether or not the landlord is owed money.
Right, definitely, and the status matters. So just like the roommate or the sub lessee can't start an application, or that's our understanding. Let's say there's an issue with somebody has a succession rights claim, meaning let's say there's a husband and wife in an apartment, the lease is in one of their names, it's a rent stabilized building, and let's say the husband is no longer there but the wife is there. We would want to advocate with the landlord first to add the wife to the lease to make sure she has the status that she needs to have in order to be able to apply for this program. So there's going to be individual fact patterns that come up that you may need to get some support on. And if that's your situation, please don't hesitate to reach out for support. And I just want to remind everyone, this is not money that is recoupable or must be repaid, unlike a one-shot deal from HRA. We understand there's challenges in accessing the program, but we really want to encourage everybody who believes they could be eligible to apply. And we're here to support you in that effort.
Okay, well, should we wrap up if there's no other questions? All right, so we want to remind you guys this presentation was recorded, so we will send the recording out along with the PowerPoint so that you have those as resources to refer back to. Along with these resources, we'll send the document requirements list so that you have that as a reference, so you know what you need to gather in order to be prepared to apply. We again encourage everyone here to apply as soon as possible within the first 30 days of the program. Today's June 15th, that means we have another 15 days for the first 30 days of the program since it was open on June 1st. And if you need assistance with your application, another reminder is do not hesitate to reach out to the list of organizations that received funding in order to help community members. If you aren't able to get in touch with someone, just keep calling. There's a lot of people applying to the program, and so they've been flooded with people needing help, but you should continue to call for as long as it takes to get the help that you need, either through OTDA itself or through these other agencies. And if all of that fails, feel free to reach out to POTS, and if we have capacity, we will be helping people as much as we can. But with that, I really appreciate everyone who came, and for those of you who asked questions and engaged with us. We wish you guys all the luck in applying to this program, and again, feel free to reach out with any questions. So thanks again.
Thank you, Carissa, and thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us.